4 weeks into the USFL, we talking a full month, and we got some good news for the optimistic out there. Also, the XFL has made a few announcements recently as they kind of slowly ramp up into their comeback season in 2023. So if spring football is ever gonna work, this kind of feels like the time. In this one, we're gonna talk about the USFL's steady TV numbers, plus team records and league leaders through 4 weeks. We're gonna talk about how the NFL is still poaching talent from the XFL, and while this will present some challenges, overall, it's definitely a good thing for the Rocks Football League. Spring football is an ongoing story, so enjoy these times that we're in. That way, when the 30 for 30 drop in 10-15 years, you can say, I was there. I was plugged in while it was all happening in real time. But without further ado, you already know what time it is, fellas. Cue the Wayne. So let's start with the USFL since I didn't do an update last week. And FYI, going forward, these will likely move to once or twice per month, as I want to keep y'all updated with how these leagues as a whole are progressing, but I don't really want to flood you with these every single week, especially when I got so much other content dropping. But 4 weeks into the USFL, and so far, so good. All the games have been competitive for the most part. There's been standout performances, and based on these TV numbers, seem to be a decent little fan base developing. So I talked about the first couple weeks in my first couple videos about this. If you want to check those out, I'll link the playlist at the end. And through these last couple of weeks, viewership has actually been pretty damn strong overall, although there have been some low points that we'll talk about as well. So week 3 had 2 Saturday games and 2 Sunday games. The early Saturday game averaged 825,000 viewers, and the primetime Saturday game averaged 1.1 mil. That was the weekend of the NFL draft, by the way, and they still turned in really good numbers. As a matter of fact, these numbers represent an increase from the week before. Now, Sunday's games did not do as well, and the USA games in general just haven't performed great, both hovering around the 300,000 average viewer mark. Then the final game that week was a Peacock exclusive. They don't even release the numbers for those, but it's probably pretty low. And I can't fully speak from their perspective, but from a YouTuber perspective, you know, I've been doing this 6-7 years now. Anytime you sign up for an exclusive deal with the network or platform, in them situations, you're making your money based off the exclusivity deal. You understand going in that the viewership is gonna be lower than what you're accustomed to. But in the content world, a place of extreme uncertainty, sometimes you just gotta take that guaranteed deal for the security. But again, overall, really solid numbers, and they're holding strong week to week. Now, week 4 was even better, though it did not start off great. First off, they had a really late Friday night game that aired at 9:20 p.m. Central Time, 10:20 p.m. Eastern. Extremely late for a football game, and that one barely averaged over 200,000 viewers, which was actually the lowest in the USFL's entire season. So just don't schedule games that late no more if you can help it. But they bounced back in a major way over the next 2 days, as both the Saturday and Sunday night primetime games averaged over 1 million viewers on Fox and NBC respectively. So primetime football on back-to-back days and hitting over 1 mil on both of them, that's pretty damn impressive. But all in all, I would think that the USFL is pretty happy with these numbers, seeing as how they're very similar to what the XFL was doing before they got shut down. And so essentially this first year spring football league is going head to head with like mainstay sports. These are similar numbers to what the NHL is putting up. These are better numbers than what MLS is putting up. So the USFL is definitely doing a thing. But before we jump over to the XFL news, I want to talk about the USFL standings and some of the league leaders. So perpetual home team, the Birmingham Stallions, are still undefeated, bro. 4-0, sitting at the top of the league. The New Jersey Generals and New Orleans Breakers are both 3-1, with each team's only loss coming against the Birmingham Stallions. Philly and Tampa Bay are both sitting at 500. Then Michigan and Houston are both 1-3. Then there's the lowly Pittsburgh Maulers at an embarrassing 0-4. Yes, this is Kirby Wilson's team, you know, Pizzagate guy and bro. Oh, Kirby really ain't been a huge help to the league. He got him their first negative story, which may still be their biggest story, and then out on the field, he's yet to produce a single win. Kirby gonna have to figure it out, man, but it's crazy because he got humbled immediately. Now, New Orleans quarterback Kyle Sloter has probably been the star of the league so far. He's the only quarterback in the league who's already thrown for over 1,000 yards, and dude is up by a considerable margin. Last week, he engineered a game-winning drive, and that's not the first time he came through in the clutch. That said, his touchdown to interception ratio isn't very impressive. He's making mistakes, but he's bouncing back from them. Now, New Orleans not only has the top passer, but they also have the current top rusher in the league with Jordan Ellis out of Virginia. Through 4 games, he's amassed just under 350 rush yards, and he's currently on top. But Reggie Corbin, who missed the game, might actually have something to say about that very soon, as this dude is averaging 102 rush yards per game for Michigan, easily the best per game average in the league. For receivers, there's a pretty crazy thing going on, as 3 of the top 4 receivers all play for the same team. Remember I said Kyle Sloter may be the star of this league? Well, dude is spreading it around, and he's got 3 receivers in the top 4. They're all over 200 receiving yards, and it's crazy because they damn near have identical stats. But Sal Cannella, Jonathan Adams, and Johnny Dixon are all doing their things, and this might just be the best trio in the league. Now, before we move on, I did want to give a Deandre Johnson update since I used to cover Last Chance U so heavily. Deandre is actually playing really well, but he's still splitting time at QB for the New Jersey Generals. Dude's got the highest QBR in the league by a mile. Plus, he's also got the highest completion percentage. That said, you don't want to lean too far into those numbers because at this point, Deandre is only averaging 8 attempts per game, as the Generals are still sticking to their 2-quarterback system. And hey, it's got them to 3-1, so I understand why the coach hasn't changed from that standpoint. But last week, Deandre threw 10 passes, completed 9 of them for 98 yards and a touchdown. The week before, he threw 8 passes, completed 6 of them for 130 yards. Plus, in that same game, he rushed for 91 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Dude has played great, and his team is 3-1 in part because of what he's done. I've been vocal about wishing he had a full-time role, but he's doing the most with what he's getting currently, and that's really all you can ask. That said, coming up in week 5, man, the game of the week to me, you got the New Orleans Breakers versus the New Jersey Generals. That's the star of the league so far, Kyle Sloter, versus Deandre Johnson and Perez and, the rest of the Generals team. Both teams are 3-1, playing at 2 p.m. Central on Fox, and I'm gonna definitely make sure I catch this one. All right, now moving on to some quick XFL news. So after the XFL's 2020 season, the NFL added about 50 or so of those XFL players to NFL roster. Well, now the XFL braces to potentially lose Vice President of Player Personnel for the league, Doug Whaley. And while I'm sure if you the XFL, losing your best guys is, that's gonna suck, right? But the good thing about it is this: if the quality of players and coaches and executives that you have in your league are good enough to get poached by the NFL, for a startup league, you probably doing something right. Now, it's worth noting that Doug Whaley actually comes from the NFL. He worked for the Steelers for like 10 years, and then he was the GM in Buffalo from 2013 to 2017. So he had a ton of NFL experience when he was hired on to work for the XFL. And now he's apparently been interviewing for NFL GM jobs. Doesn't mean that he'll land one, so it doesn't mean that he'll leave. But I just thought this was an interesting little bit to open up with, kind of showing the quality of some of these guys that the XFL has. So the XFL recently announced that they're partnering with Inside the League and FB Exchange to help bolster their scouting department. They were at the NFL Combine, they were at Pro Days, basically looking for guys who fall just short of the NFL, and they want to be there to let them know that there is another alternative. And the XFL is looking legit with the star power. Obviously, it's owned and heavily promoted by The Rock, but as far as the football itself, they already announced coaches like Wade Phillips, Hines Ward, Rod Woodson. We talking respectable names that bring instant validity and credibility to the league. Bob Stoops, Jim Haslett, like they got dudes. But the one thing that can truly separate them from the USFL will be playing in stadiums across the country as opposed to having all their games in one central location. For those who don't know, all the USFL games are played in Birmingham, Alabama at the same stadium, which is one of the main reasons they struggle struggle with attendance. We saw the XFL's last iteration fill stadiums, and the atmosphere at some of those games was actually pretty damn insane. That said, the XFL is yet to announce exactly where their games are going to be held during their return 2023 season. But there was an article posted on XFLboard.com a few days ago that spoke on this. I kind of sum it up for you, but in the article they basically said the XFL is staying quiet until every single duck is in a row, as they don't want bad press if they announce something too early and then had to backtrack. We all know that people hate that more than anything, so being quiet is probably the best way to go. But then the article goes on to discuss rumors that the XFL season would be held in a hub city similar to what the USFL is doing, which, let's be honest, would kind of suck currently. That's like the only thing about the USFL that I don't like. I understand it. I completely get the move, but I don't think anybody is denying that it would be a better product if they were in local stadiums in the cities that they represent. But the article speaking on the XFL states that those rumors may have gone out the window last week when the XFL announced that they'd hired a senior vice president of team services. Here's the job description. Erica will act as a liaison between the league's business operation departments and all 8 teams. She will manage day-to-day business operations for each of the XFL's 8 teams, including developing a consultative model to optimize market inputs and executing growth strategies in local markets as the XFL prepares for its 2023 season. I know that was a lot, but the part you need to pay attention to is the whole executing growth strategies in local markets part. Like, that's the part. That part seems to suggest that the plan is, at least, for the teams to play in the cities that they represent. And it would be really, really clutch, because that was a huge part of what people remember about that most recent iteration of the XFL. But with that said, this is just, you know, the writers of this article and me trying to read between the lines. None of this stuff is set in stone, which is why the XFL hasn't announced it as of yet. All this really says is that they have plans to do that. They would like to have the teams play in the cities, but until we get a formal announcement on that, this is pretty much just speculation. Informed speculation, but speculation nonetheless. So that's it for today's spring football update. I think we're actually in a great time for spring ball, and these next few years are going to be crucial, as we could see one of these leagues, if not both, become a mainstay and something that people look forward to every single year. And who knows, if they play their cards right, maybe one day one of these leagues might actually be able to compete with the NFL for top players, just like the old USFL used to way back in the day. Peace.